In 1972, a new shape emerged in the cutthroat world of the fighter, the F-15 Eagle. It was designed to outfly any known warplane, and it was this margin of performance and technological superiority over its rivals that allowed it to remain at the top for over 30 years. Born out of the requirements of the war in Vietnam, the Eagle was deployed as the West's first line of defense in the Cold War standoff with the Soviet Union, but received its baptism of fire in the crucible of the Middle East, first with the Israelis and then with the Americans in Operation Desert Storm. It saw further action over the Balkans and again over Iraq in 2003. Today it remains the world's premier in-service fighter. After nearly 2 decades serving as a pure fighter, the Eagle then spawned a lethal precision attack derivative that is today considered the benchmark for multi-role fighter bombers. This multi-role Eagle is still much in demand and is still in production for important customers such as Korea and Singapore over 30 years after the prototype first flew. When the F-15 was formulated, it was intended to provide air superiority over a wide range or long endurance, carrying a large, powerful radar with a heavy missile load. That implied a large structure to carry the fuel and payload. Today, the F-15 remains one of the largest fighters, partnered in the US Air Force by the smaller F-16 in a high-low fighter mix. The concept was also followed in the Soviet Union to produce the even larger Sukhoi Su-27, partnered by the smaller MiG-29. With its powerful engines, the F-15 is one of the world's top-performing fighters. Using a specially prepared F-15 known as the Streak Eagle, McDonnell Douglas demonstrated the F-15's brute power in 1975 by setting a series of time-to-height world records. In terms of maneuverability, the F-15 was also a winner, introducing new levels of agility for such a large aircraft. Much of the turning performance came from the big wing, which was very efficient at both low speed during a dogfight and at high altitude during supersonic engagements. Powerful tailplanes combined with the twin fins and the big wing to give excellent controllability and agility at low speed, further aided by the shape of the intakes, which capture sufficient air even when the angle of attack is high. With the introduction of the F-100-200 engine in the second generation F-15C and D, the new digital engine control unit combined with the airframe overload system to provide the F-15C pilot with the world's first fully carefree service fighter. At last, the pilot could slam the throttle back and forth and could maneuver as hard as he or she dared without having to worry about keeping the aircraft within its limits. Although the latest fighter types that are just entering service have eclipsed the Eagle in some performance areas, the imposing F-15 outperforms most of its rivals and contemporaries in key areas. Most importantly, it can still more than hold its own in air combat. terms of weapons, the Fighter Eagle initially inherited the missiles of the Phantom that preceded it. For close-in work, the Eagle was fitted with a 20mm Vulcan cannon. This fired through a port in the starboard wing glove section. And was fed with ammunition from a tank on the center line. 4 medium-range radar-guided Sparrows were carried on the lower corners of the engine trunks. While the 2 underwing pylons could mount 4 short-range AIM-9 sidewinders on shoulder rails. This left the lower wing and centerline hardpoints free for the carriage of drop tanks. Alternative short-range weapons were fielded by the Israelis, who adopted the indigenous Python 3 and latterly Python 4 and 5, while Japan now makes use of the Mitsubishi AAM-3 as a sidewinder equivalent. In the United States Air Force, the latest generation AIM-9X is currently replacing the earlier sidewinder models. In 1991, a new medium-range weapon arrived for the US Air Force's fighter Eagles, the AIM-120 AMRAAM. Known colloquially as the Slammer, the AMRAAM revolutionized the fighter's capabilities by introducing active radar capability, in which the missile itself also has a radar antenna and processor. During an AMRAAM engagement, the Eagle's radar tracks the target during the initial phase of the missile's flyout. The fighter radar sends continually updated target positional data via a data link to the missile. Once the target is within range, the missile's radar is switched on, and if the target updates provided by the fighter have been sufficiently accurate, the target is automatically acquired by the missile's own radar. At this point, guidance of the terminal phase of the engagement is handed over completely to the missile. AMRAAM is much more accurate than the Sparrow and also has a longer range. The earlier weapon required the Eagle's radar to illuminate the target throughout its flyout, effectively tying the Eagle pilot to close with the target all the time the missile was in the air. When firing AMRAAM, however, the Eagle pilot is free to maneuver away once the missile has taken over the engagement. Fighter-bomber F-15Es can carry the same air-to-air weapons as their dedicated fighter brethren, but also add a massive arsenal of air-to-surface weapons. As well as the existing wing and centerline pylons, F-15Es carry weapons on Dash 4 conformal fuel tanks. Each CFT has 1 long pylon with 3 hardpoints running along the underside and 3 stub pylons mounted laterally. Unguided free-fall weapons still have their place in the F-15's armory, based mostly on the Mark 80 series of iron bombs. Free-fall options also include a range of cluster bombs. These weapons are mainly used against area targets such as concentrations of troops or soft-skinned vehicles. At a pre-programmed height, the dispenser splits apart to distribute the submunitions over a wide area. The F-15E is one of the US Air Force's prime carriers of the B-61 tactical nuclear bomb. For precision attacks, a range of guided weapons is available, the most popular being the laser-guided Paveway 2 family of bombs. The AGM-65 Maverick and the GPS-guided JDAM series. Both LGB and JDAM families come in a variety of sizes and with general purpose and penetration warheads. for pre-planned missions, the F-15E can also employ some specialist weapons. The GBU-15 is an electro-optically guided bomb that can be flown with great accuracy by the weapons system officer or can be programmed to fly according to a target recognition algorithm. In the eGBU-15 version, GPS guidance is added to provide a backup should other guidance means fail. While the AGM-130 is a powered version with a rocket booster added to provide greater range. Perhaps the most impressive of the F-15E's specialist weapons is the GBU-28 bunker buster, irreverently known as the Deep Throat Bomb. This massive laser-guided weapon buries itself deep in the ground before exploding to destroy underground facilities. The combination of pylons allows the F-15E to carry a bewildering array of weaponry in an almost infinite number of variations. The flexibility of the Strike Eagle's pylons and weapons system make it ideal for armed patrol missions, in which the aircraft has to be ready to respond to a range of pop-up threats. A mix of laser and GPS-guided munitions can be carried together, plus AMRAAMs and sidewinders for the air-to-air role. Such weapons versatility is one reason why the F-15E is considered the world's best fighter bomber. At the heart of the F-15's weapon system is its radar. Originally developed by Hughes as the APG-63, it is now a product of the giant Raytheon Corporation. The APG-63 was the first modern pulse Doppler radar, which uses the Doppler shift effect to remove unwanted returns from the ground. This allows the radar to see and target low-flying aircraft clearly. Look-down, shoot-down capability is now taken for granted, but when the Eagle appeared, it represented a quantum leap in radar capability. Over the years, the radar has been steadily improved and spawned the APG-70 derivative that was initially developed for the F-15E fighter bomber. However, the APG-70 was also adapted for fighter Eagles. Among the new features introduced was a track-wild scan mode that allowed the Eagle to fire 2 AMRAAM missiles simultaneously at 2 separate targets. In an air defense scenario, identification of potential targets is crucial to avoid friendly fire. As well as working with AWACS and ground-based air operations centers, the F-15 pilot has a number of systems at his or her disposal to identify targets. The IFF, or Identification Friend or Foe system, sends out signals to interrogate the target aircraft. The most important development, however, was the incorporation of non-cooperative target recognition, or NCTR, capability in the APG-70 radar. Harnessing the greatly expanded power of its new processor, the APG-70 can identify targets by aircraft type. Just how accurate NCTR is and the details of how it works remain sensitive areas, but the basic concept involves the radar signatures from target aircraft being compared against a library in the F-15's radar system. The main distinguishing element in a jet aircraft is the varying size, number, and speed of the blades making up the engine's compressor face. NCTR algorithms analyze the radar return to compute these variables and in turn produce an identification of the target. Of course, the F-15's radar must be able to see down the intakes of the target aircraft, restricting its use to near head-on engagements. APG-70 is no longer in production, the current Eagle radar being the APG-63 V1. 18 special F-15s based in Alaska are fitted with the APG-63 V2, which dispenses with the traditional mechanically steered antenna in favor of an active electronically steered antenna, or ASA. APG-70 radars equip most F-15E fighter bombers, although the later aircraft have APG-63 V1. All, however, have a number of additional ground-mapping radar modes which distinguish them from their fighter brethren. The most important is high-resolution mapping, or HRM. HRM uses synthetic aperture radar technology to create high-resolution images of ground targets. As the aircraft flies along, the radar takes a rapid series of snapshots of the chosen area, all from a very slightly different angle to exploit minute changes in the Doppler shift, that is, the small differences in relative speed of the target to the aircraft as it flies along. Working flat out over a short period of time, the radar can build up a near photo quality image of the target area, known as a patch map, with a resolution of as little as 8.5 feet. The F-15E also has terrain-following radar in the lantern pod that allows the aircraft to fly safely at low level, even at night or in bad weather. This TFR gives the F-15E crew the ability to sneak up on its target unseen, popping up to create a patch map and to sweep the target area for enemy fighters before descending back to the safety of low level. Often, a second, more accurate patch map is taken nearer the target to refine the targeting coordinates. Using the patch map, the weapon systems officer can designate an aim point.
There's our target.
When the aircraft runs in for its final attack, the other sensors are automatically cued to the designated point, allowing the weapon systems officer to refine the final coordinates.
Bomb's gone, bomb's gone. Kilo, what's up, hot?
When it entered service in 1975, the Eagle introduced many innovations, among which was a revolutionary cockpit design. The aim was to minimize the amount of time the pilot spent looking at the instruments during combat. When he was head down, he couldn't see the fight outside, so diminishing his situational awareness. On top of the instrument panel was a head-up display, the HUD, which presented the pilot with clear and crucial information about the target and his aircraft. Switches on the throttle and stick allowed control of the aircraft's weapons and systems without having to move hands to find a switch. The HUD and hands-on throttle and stick, or HOTAS technology, allowed the pilot to control and monitor the vital aspects of the aircraft in the middle of a fight without ever having to look down into the cockpit. Below the HUD was a panel for control of the display, the identification friend or foe system, and vital communications. To the right was the TEWS threat warning scope, and to the left was the VSD for radar data. The radar screen displayed information in the form of clear, annotated symbols. Grouped in the center of the panel were the primary flight instruments, although crucial data such as altitude and airspeed were also presented in the head-up display. Engine instruments take up the right-hand side of the main panel, with armament controls on the left. Aircraft systems, communications and navigation controls, not crucial during combat, are located in consoles either side of the pilot. A major cockpit change came with the MSIP-2 upgrade. The armament panel was replaced by a large multi-purpose screen that could display a variety of information. Among the available screens is the situation display, or SIT, which is a complete tactical picture merged from various sources, including other Eagles and the AWACS. The cockpits of the F-15E are very different. The front cockpit has a wide-angle HUD that can be used for displaying infrared imagery from the lantern system for low-level flying at night. The pilot has 3 large multi-purpose screens, while the weapons systems officer in the back has 4. These screens can show a wealth of different images, such as aircraft checklists, navigation data, moving map imagery from the infrared sensor, a repeat of the pilot's head-up display, and patch maps. The backseater controls the screens and the weapon system by using 2 hand controllers. Thanks to continuing development, the F-15's cockpit remains among the most modern anywhere. When the F-15 entered service, it introduced many new and advanced technologies, many of which had cascaded down from the Apollo space program. A key area was the power plant. Whereas all the air in a traditional turbojet passes through the hot core of the engine, in the Pratt & Whitney F-100 developed for the F-15, some of the air was ducted around. This bypass air mixed with the hot core air downstream, where the combined flow entered an afterburner section before exiting through a variable area nozzle. Known as the augmented turbofan, this type of engine produced very high thrust, but with reduced fuel burn. General Electric's F-110 can also be fitted to the Eagle, and has been specified by the latest customers, Korea and Singapore. The nodding intakes have 2 variable ramps to optimize airflow across a wide speed range and at high angles of attack. Fuel in the basic Eagle airframe is housed in wing and fuselage tanks, the latter protected by fire-retardant foam. The F-15C and E derivatives can also carry conformal fuel tanks along the fuselage sides, and a range of drop tanks is available. Ranks for the avionics black boxes are mainly housed in the forward fuselage between the radar and the cockpit, with additional systems behind the cockpit. The control surfaces are hydraulically powered and consist of simple ailerons and twin rudders. And tailerons that operate simultaneously for pitch control and differentially for roll control. Simple flaps are provided for extra lift at low speed. On the spine is a large air brake. And for emergency landings, an airfield arrestor hook is fitted. The undercarriage is hydraulically actuated and retracts forwards. Carbon disc brakes are fitted with an anti-skid system. Over the years, the F-15 airframe and its systems architecture has proven to be sturdy and well thought out. It has proved adaptable and versatile, key factors in the type's longevity. F-15 deliveries to the United States Air Force began on the 14th of November 1974, when President Gerald Ford accepted the first aircraft at the main training base at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona. Another training base was later established at Tyndall in Florida. The first operational unit to get the F-15 was the first fighter wing at Langley, which was followed by similar units at Holloman in New Mexico, Eglin in Florida, and later at Mountain Home, Idaho. Trials units operated F-15s from Eglin, Nellis, and Edwards. Away from the lower 48 states, Eagles were deployed to Bitburg in West Germany, Soesterberg in the Netherlands, Elmendorf in Alaska, and Kadena on the Japanese island of Okinawa. As well as these general-purpose fighter units, Eagles were also assigned to squadrons dedicated to the defense of the United States, strategically located at McCord, Minot, Langley, and at Keflavik in Iceland. As more Eagles became available, a number of reservist units began to operate the type, including the National Guards of Georgia, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Missouri, Oregon, and Hawaii. F-15E fighter bombers were delivered to a training unit at Luke and then to operational units at Seymour Johnson in North Carolina, Mountain Home, Elmendorf, and Lakenheath in England. Israel was the first foreign customer to receive the Eagle, acquiring its first aircraft in December 1976. In June 1979, Israeli Eagles were the first to see action, shooting down 4 Syrian MiGs in skirmishes over Lebanon. In June 1982, major air battles erupted over the Bekaa Valley. In the course of this fighting, Israeli Eagles claimed 40 enemy aircraft for no loss. The F-15 has remained Israel's premier fighter, and the fleet continues to be updated with new weapons and systems. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia received its first fighter Eagles in 1981 for service from air bases at Dhahran, Taif, and Khamis Mushait. On the 5th of June 1984, at the height of the Iran-Iraq War, 2 Saudi F-15s intercepted 2 Iranian Phantoms, shooting one down and badly damaging the other. Japan's Eagles were also delivered from 1981. The first few F-15J single-seaters and F-15DJ two-seaters were built in the US, but production was increasingly shifted to Japan, where Mitsubishi builds the Eagle under license. Eagles replaced Phantoms and Starfighters in the air defense role and were deployed to Chitose, Komatsu, Hayakuri, Nutabaru, and Tsuiki. Nutabaru houses the training squadron and a small unit used for aggressor air combat training. For the United States Air Force Eagle pilots, the call to action came in August 1990 when Iraq invaded Kuwait. Within days of the invasion, Eagles from the US Air Force's 1st Fighter Wing had arrived in Saudi Arabia as part of Operation Desert Shield. When the coalition launched its attack on Iraqi forces, F-15s operated in the offensive counter-air role, sweeping the skies clear of enemy fighters ahead of coalition air attacks. More Eagles performed defensive counter-air missions to the south of the border to prevent any Iraqi aircraft from attacking Saudi Arabian bases. Others performed the high-value asset CAP mission, protecting valuable aircraft resources such as the AWACS control platform. 34 Iraqi aircraft fell to the F-15 during the conflict, including several of the much-vaunted MiG-29. 2 further kills from the Gulf War were credited to a Saudi pilot, Saleh al-Shamrani, who shot down 2 Mirage F-1s on the 24th of January. Although having just entered service, the F-15E fighter bomber was also thrown into the fray over Iraq, compiling a good record of bombing attacks. It was even credited with an air-to-air kill when a crew managed to guide a laser bomb onto a helicopter that had just taken off. During the 1990s, Eagles from the US Air Force's Europe-based units were in action over the Balkans. In 1999, NATO unleashed an all-out campaign against Serbia and Montenegro over its failure to pull out of Kosovo. During Operation Allied Force, F-15Es flew relentlessly on precision strike missions, while again it was the F-15Cs that provided the first line of air defense against Yugoslav fighters. Opposition was encountered only on the first few nights of the war, during which F-15Cs accounted for 4 Yugoslav MiG-29s. With no aerial opposition over Afghanistan in Operation Enduring Freedom in 2001, or during Iraqi Freedom in 2003, the F-15C crews conducted their duties with little interruption. However, the F-15E was heavily involved in both campaigns in the precision bombing role. During the brief campaign over Afghanistan, F-15Es flew from bases in the Persian Gulf. As well as pre-planned strikes, they flew armed patrols, waiting for targets to appear or for ground forces to require assistance. One of these missions reached 15.5 hours in length, the longest recorded fighter mission ever flown. The F-15E essentially repeated these roles over Iraq in 2003, although there were far more pre-planned targets. It was the F-15E that dropped the very first bombs of the war, when a flight of 4 attacked an underground air defense node with bunker buster weapons. "30 years on, the Eagle remains the most successful fighter of recent times and the yardstick by which fighter bombers are measured." The F-15C Eagle fighter can perform the whole range of air defense duties, from point interception to wide area sanitation. Its forte, however, is the offensive counter-air mission, flying deep into hostile airspace to shoot down the enemy and to protect friendly attack aircraft. There are various ways in which the Eagle can protect friendlies. For instance, the F-15s can fly with the strike package in the fighter escort mission, or can set up a CAP, or combat air patrol, over the target itself. Utilizing the Eagle's capabilities to the full, the fighter sweep has become the most common mode of employment. The mission is simple. Shoot down any enemy aircraft that appear in a given area during a specified period. The Eagle sweep sanitizes the area before a friendly strike package flies through. It protects the friendlies during their attack, and it covers their tails as they exit the danger zone. Detailed orders for a fighter sweep involve the assignment of the area to be covered and a start and finish time for the coverage. This will correspond with the strike package's target attack schedule. A four-ship is the standard sweep formation, and the aircraft will be loaded with a primary armament of 4 AMRAAM missiles, plus 4 sidewinders for short-range engagements. Drop tanks are carried for long range. In the air defense mission, Eagles are held on quick reaction alert, already fueled and armed, and ready to launch within a matter of minutes. If the alert is sounded, ground and air crew rush to the aircraft to get the engine started and systems aligned in the shortest possible time. As soon as the fighter is ready, it taxis from its shelter or parking spot and heads straight for the runway. In a live air defense launch, the pilots waste no time getting airborne, but for a pre-planned fighter sweep, there is not the same urgency, unless they're running late in meeting their assigned time on station. Even with a full load, the F-15 is one of the fastest climbing aircraft in the world. In a live intercept, the aircraft will climb quickly with full afterburner to reach the intruder as quickly as possible, like this Langley-based Eagle. For a pre-planned fighter sweep, the takeoff will be less dramatic, as the pilots fly a more fuel-efficient takeoff profile. Depending on the range and endurance requirements of the mission, a tanker rendezvous may be scheduled prior to entering hostile airspace. As the F-15s approach their assigned area, they adopt a battle formation. At night or in difficult conditions, they might fly in a radar trail or possibly in card formation. But when conditions are good, they form the Wall of Eagles. Here, the formation is spread out in a line, each aircraft spaced 1 to 2 miles apart. By slewing the radar scan patterns of the outer aircraft, a massive volume of sky can be swept by the four-ship formation. When aircraft are detected in the sweep area, the first task is to identify them as hostile. The pilots use the Eagle's IFF system and the radar's non-cooperative target recognition functions for this task, as well as communicating with the circling AWACS radar platform. Working together, the AWACS controllers and F-15 pilots verify the identity of the targets to satisfy the rules of engagement. With the targets established as enemy aircraft, the Eagle flight accelerates to fighting speed, and the flight leader supervises the target sort, in which the targets are assigned to individual members of the flight. This is normally performed by arranging the targets in azimuth, and once a target has been allocated, the F-15 pilot follows it no matter how the target maneuvers. This sometimes requires the aircraft to change places in the wall formation so that the azimuth sought continues to correspond to the eagle formation. Fighter pilots always want to exploit the capabilities of the aircraft systems and weapons package to the full. For the Eagle, with its powerful radar and long-range AMRAAM missiles, that means firing missiles at ranges that hopefully outgun the capabilities of the opposition. With the targets locked up, identified, sorted, and within parameters, the F-15s are ready to attack, and missiles are fired. As soon as the missiles are in the air, the Eagles perform the F-pole maneuver. Turning away from the target, they hold a course to keep the shooter-to-target distance as great as possible, but keeping the target within the limits of the radar's view. A clock in the cockpit counts down to the time that the missile is due to hit. When firing AMRAAM, the F-15 supports the missile out to a range at which the weapons radar can take over the engagement itself. As soon as this happens, the Eagle can turn away completely from the engagement. However, pilots usually turn back in towards the target for the last few seconds of the missile's flight to check that it has hit, and to recheck the area for any more targets that might have appeared. If the missile has missed, the F-15 pilot follows up rapidly with a short-range shot with either an AMRAAM or a Sidewinder. With a successful engagement concluded, the F-15s regroup and reform the wall of Eagles, continuing the fighter sweep until the strike package is safely through the target area. With their sweep assignment successfully completed, the F-15s return to base to be prepared for the next mission.
Okay, we're welcome. Hello, sir. How are you doing? Well, it's good to be somewhere else.
Today's all-conquering F-15 is the product of a long line of continuous development that reaches back to the aircraft's definition in the late 1960s, a time when contemporary US Air Force fighters were being severely tested in air combat by North Vietnamese MiGs. To redress the imbalance, the US Air Force launched its FX program for an air superiority fighter. As well as the requirement to defend the USA against Soviet bombers like these Tupolev Bears, the new fighter would have to mix it in close-in dogfights. On the 23rd of December 1969, the winner of the FX competition was announced. The McDonnell Aircraft Company, which later became part of Boeing, would develop the Air Force's next-generation fighter, the F-15 Eagle. Mac Air's new fighter was certainly different to anything that had preceded it. The bulky forward fuselage tapered away to almost nothing towards the rear, blending near seamlessly into the wing and engine bodies. The pilot sat in an enormous bulged canopy with an unparalleled all-round view. Behind him, a massive air brake was fitted. Huge engine trunks formed the fuselage sides, with smaller side bodies added outboard to which were attached the wings and tail surfaces. Twin fins provided directional stability at high angles of attack, and the massive wings were lightly loaded for maximum maneuverability. 12 prototypes were built, the first of which flew on the 27th of July 1972, with Irving Burroughs at the helm. Early flight testing revealed a number of flutter and buffet problems, resulting in several aerodynamic alterations. The most obvious was an angled cropping of the tips of the wings, while a dogtooth was added to the tailplanes. From the outset, the F-15A single-seat aircraft was to be accompanied by a combat-capable trainer known initially as the TF-15A, but soon redesignated F-15B. The installation of a second cockpit did not affect overall dimensions, but changed the shape of the front end considerably. F-15As and Bs entered US Air Force service in 1974. In order to maintain the Eagle's viability in the air defense world, McDonnell Douglas engineers continued to explore ways to improve the aircraft, resulting in the F-15C single-seater and F-15D two-seater. Although both look very similar to the first-generation machines, there were many important differences inside. The internal structure was rearranged to accommodate an extra 2,000 pounds of fuel, while the aircraft could carry conformal fuel tanks, or CFTs, which bolted onto the aircraft's sides. Carrying all this extra weight required the undercarriage to be beefed up, but the large amount of extra fuel gave the Eagle a significant boost in range. Other important changes in the C and D models were the addition of an airframe overload warning system, more reliable engines, and a change partway through production to the APG-70 radar, a much faster and more capable development of the original APG-63. Israel and Saudi Arabia bought versions of the F-15C and D, with some sensitive equipment deleted or replaced. Israel equipped its aircraft with some electronic warfare items of local origin, as did Japan, which bought the similar F-15J and F-15DJ two-seater. Apart from the first few machines, Japan's aircraft were license-built by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and have recently been upgraded. It was not long before improvements were applied to the baseline F-15C, these being grouped under the Multi-Stage Improvement Program, or MSIP. The key feature of the F-15C MSIP was the APG-70 radar, which introduced new modes and new features such as non-cooperative target recognition, track-while scan, and the ability to support multiple launches of the new AMRAAM missile. Some portions of the MSIP were applied to older F-15As, although the radars were not updated to full APG-70 standard. By far the most radical development of the F-15 so far is the F-15E. Using company funds, McDonnell Douglas and the Hughes Radar Company set about producing a demonstrator of a true multi-role fighter bomber version dubbed the Strike Eagle, which evolved into the F-15E of today. Using the two-seat F-15D as a basis, the Strike Eagle has a version of the APG-70 radar with a synthetic aperture mode added for high-resolution ground mapping. Under the engine intakes hang podded sensors for low-level flight at night and for pinpoint attacks using laser guidance. New Dash 4 CFTs were fitted, each with 6 bomb-carrying hardpoints. The cockpits were redesigned with state-of-the-art displays to allow the crew to undertake fighter-bomber missions in all weather and light conditions. slightly downgraded Strike Eagles were sold as the F-15S to Saudi Arabia and to Israel as the F-15I RAM. First flying in 2005 was another export version, the F-15K for Korea. Otherwise similar to the F-15E, the main alteration is a change to General Electric power. In 2005, Singapore announced that it was to buy the F-15T for multi-role missions, again based on the F-15E Strike Eagle.
実用化されている世界唯一の第5世代戦闘機 F-22 ラプター。高いステルス性、超機動性、超音速巡航を兼ね備えたラプターはまさに世界最高峰の戦闘機です。次号ではこの最新戦闘機ラプターを細かく分析します。次号もぜひお買い求めください。